Okay, I want to take you on to some form corrections now. Now, the correct way to teach the internal martial arts is, of course, one-on-one. Except when you're doing stuff like this, but I always, as you know, always find time if someone's doing something wrong, I'll get around to you individually and do some corrections that way. When I first started my classes in Sydney, I literally would have classes of, this whole, you couldn't move, but I'd still get around to each individual person, and no one would be at the same level. But I found that was just, it got impossible after a while because I was getting too many people and I just couldn't get around to the people in a lesson. So then I had to start teaching it in the more Western way. However, the best way, of course, is to have smaller classes and or private lessons where you've just got one-on-one or maybe one with 2 or 3 people. And that's the best way, because everyone's an individual and everyone needs attention. And the traditional way of learning which is what I'm coming back around to now, because I can, I'm getting old enough now to take it a bit easier, is to teach Tai Chi in a traditional sense. And that is, you follow you look at what your teacher's doing rather than what he perhaps says, although I have pretty good communication skills I've built up over the past 35 years. However, it's being able to look at a body moving and then being able to try and emulate what that body is doing. And that's the most important thing when you're learning the internal systems, because it's not a fact of learning raise your hands, put your hands down, put your hands here, put your hands here, because then forevermore, until you see the more advanced way of doing it, and unfortunately not many people ever do, I mean our circle of people do, that's the way you think about it forevermore. You think about this movement as being 1, 2 movements, rather than the whole thing being just one long movement, just a series of movements, rather than doing, oh, I'm doing single foot now. And so on. But rather than just, because you've all heard the old saying of, okay, it takes 6 years just to learn a form. Well, it does take 6 years to learn it. But you'd come to my lesson and you'd stand there and I'd start doing the form. And you'd be behind me going, you'd be lost after that. So you come back for 6 years every day for 6 years, and by the time 6 years up, finally you might have just been able to get through the whole form with me as I do it. But if you do it that way, it goes in up here rather than going in down here and then having to work your way up to there, you see. It probably all takes the same amount of time anyway to get to that point. So what I'm tending to do nowadays is to make a compromise with that. So rather than just doing it that way, I take the first few moves up to here. Just up to there. And the student looks at that, and then we say, okay, let's do it again, get behind me. And the student says, but what about, shut up! Just look at what I'm doing. So eventually the student starts doing it. But it's still just the student waving their hands around. Although